It was a sunny Saturday. The breakneck height in upstate New York, Cold Spring, was much more than a hike. It was more like a rock climbing experience. But it was a lot of fun. So after 10 hours in the sun and multiple delayed trains, I get home, head swinging, extremely tired. I get ready to get to my bed, and it's like 10:30 in the night. And my phone rings obnoxiously. It's 1:30 a.m., and I realize that there's a work incident that's happened that's causing me a pager duty alert. I muster the strength to get out of my bed and find my laptop, log into it, to understand that there's a manhole fire that's cut all access to our data center. I'm in my warrior mode. My talk here will be a short presentation about a real-life incident of a manhole fire that caused a company outage for us. And the talk would actually help you prepare for such situations and be able to manage that from the center of the tornado when the situation is happening, and then understand what you can take away from it and learn from those situations. Hi, I'm Rashi Khurana. I'm Vice President of Engineering at Shutterstock. I lead the e-commerce front-end teams and the platform on which the teams are, the front-end is running. So front-end is basically where customers are downloading their content, searching for their content. Shutterstock, if you don't know, it's a global technology company. It offers a creative platform, tools and services to manage all your high-quality assets. So you'll understand from my deck that I'm from a stock photography company. You'll see a lot of pictures here. For those of you who do not know what the war room is a word used in technical organizations to refer to a place where you can organize yourselves when such situations happen. Some companies call it the service operating center. Some call it the network operating center. We call it the war room. So let's talk about why is it so critical to the situation of a company outage is so critical. Right? First of all, stress. We've all been through some stressful situations in our life. And we know that stress is very subjective, right? Like, if a bear is running towards you, you could get stressed out. But if a spider is crawling towards you, you can still get stressed out, right? It's subjective, and we are not at our best behavior when we are stressed out. And then secondly, let's talk about the revenue and the customer impact, right? In 2016, there was a research done that showed that the B2C business was reaching a $3 trillion marketplace. And it also showed that 38% of the customers, when they go to a mobile device to go to a site, they find that a site is down. And you know what? 100% of them turn around and go find another competitor. It's like you're going to a store and you find the store is locked down, right? So you're not just losing your customers and the bad experience that they're having, but it's also the revenue that you're losing to your competitors in those situations. And it's not just about the experience, right? It's also about, what if they are in the middle of a critical bank transaction? They want to transfer money, and that's critical. Or if they're working for the creative project with a site like Shutterstock, which has a deadline, right? So that's also very important, that it can actually be critical work. So let's go back to the version of me at 1:30 a.m. in my apartment, scratching my head. And the next 2 to 3 to 5 minutes are so important to lay the ground for what would happen in the night, right? And multiple hours and hours and days of preparation goes into making that the 2, 3, 5 minutes the least stressful and the most effective. So how do you know if your companies or your teams, your organization are ready for these situations? Like, what questions do you ask to know are you prepared for it, right? The first one is mostly, what's your uptime? How much does it take for you to recover a site from an outage? Does it take a long time, or you're able to recover smoothly, easily? The other is, in your engineering teams, are your engineers feeling a lot of pager duty fatigue, which means that they are spending more time just maintaining the running of your website and less time in actually innovating and building products? Third is like the one we saw, are you getting bad media, bad press because of the instability of your website? And fourth is, of course, when you know that you're losing your customers, or you're losing your employees because of all of this. So the two key metrics when you talk about uptime, the two key metrics that you're trying to drive to keep very low are mean time to detect and mean time to resolve. So mean time to detect is when the time it takes to detect from when the outage started, and mean time to resolve is from when the outage started, you got a detected page to when it is resolved, actually. So we'll see what kind of preparations we can do to minimize the mean time to detect. First of all, it's definitely logging and monitoring, right? Like Chris was saying, like if you don't monitor your systems and you don't get alerted, you will not even know that there's an outage that's happening or there's an issue that's happening. And logging comes into very handy because if you have the right level of logging, you can aggregate those logs to put the thresholds for your error rates and stuff so that you can actually get alerted, so that you know something is going wrong, and so that you can act and fix that. And then there's service ownerships, right? In the middle of the night, you're not at your best wits to know who's owning what parts of the service or what application is owned by whom. All of that needs to be predefined and pre-understood between the organizations and the teams so you're ready for the midnight crisis. Then there's PagerDuty like rotation, like, what is your SLA? If the first person doesn't respond, what is the SLA for the next person to respond? All of that needs to be pre-set up so that you know your mean time to detect is minimum and you're not, again, finding it out in the middle of the night. You need a place to organize yourselves. Like I said, in our company, we have a war room, which is actually a physical room. So if we are in the office and something is happening, we can go to the physical room, war room. We have a Slack channel that's called the War Room, where we collaborate, and then we also have a Hangout where we can all get online to collaborate if it's the middle of the night. You need to know what is the right crew that's coming to help you at the time of the crisis, and then you obviously need some trainings for trace routes and other tools so that you can troubleshoot what's happening.
We launched this thing. There was no monitoring. There was nothing. There was no way to know. There was literally no dashboard. There was nothing. There was no place to look to find out whether the site was up today or not, except CNN, which was literally how we found out about problems a good part of the time in the beginning.
So this was a video from when in United States of America, the Healthcaregov website was launched. Millions of US citizens went online to buy health insurance, but the site was down. And what Mikey Dickerson is saying, who was pulled in to bring the site back to stability, is that they had no idea that the site was down except from CNN. That was the only place of truth because there was no monitoring that they would find out that there's something actually happening, live TV. And here is a sample of the monitoring and alerting that is set up. So there are multiple tools that do that. For one of us, like the PagerDuty tool is on the right-hand side, where you can see that when something goes beyond a threshold, you can set up an alert, and then you get alerted, an incident is opened. This is again in the PagerDuty UI. And then on the left-hand side, you see that there's an integration with New Relic to Slack to actually also notify that something is wrong and that we've got a severity critical incident going on right now. So you need to set up all of that in advance. And then let's now talk about mean time to resolution, right? Mean time to resolve. And the things that you have to make sure that you're ready for these are things like, do you have the right setups, logging credentials? If you're dialing in from home, do you have VPN set up? Do you have all the SSO set up to log into your logs? Do you have right runbooks? Runbooks are very important because, again, in the middle of the night, you don't know where to even get started to see what is happening, why is the site down. You need some hints for you to get started on all right, this is where I can start looking. So those runbooks are very important. And then you need some kind of training for your teams, like a version of this deck I had presented to my team, telling them what is the expectations from them during an outage, right? So that they know, all right, if they cannot respond, what is the next steps they need to take, so that we are ready for that. And then there's also the follow the sun approach. So since the manhole fire, so we didn't have this before, but since the manhole fire, we've set up a tier 1 triage layer at a global location, and that helps our engineers to be freed from every incident that happens because they are the first line of defense. They put the eyes on the glass 24/7, and they respond first, and then they page the teams when something else happens. Now, this is a very expensive thing to do, so it may not apply to everyone, But this is what we learned we needed because of the PagerDuty fatigue we were having in the company because of all the war room stuff. And here's a sample of the runbook, and the runbook that I use for my front-end teams. But what is most important about these runbooks is not just about your application that the runbook has information about. It also has information about the ecosystem in which your application is running. So your network configurations, your upstream services, where the data is coming in, what the dependencies are, because when things are going wrong, you need to understand all of that and not just what is happening to your application. The runbooks also come in very handy, by the way, when you have new onboarding engineers. So you can repeat this, they can read these and get to know, okay, what is the ecosystem of your application. So change management, right? Change management, like more often than not, we try to keep changes from happening, but we spend less time in making sure that when they happen, but not if, but when they happen, we can actually manage them effectively. Because in Agile, we need to welcome these changes. So change management is the process that we set up so that we can repeat these low-risk changes with a lot of confidence. And what comes in handy to do that is our Agile process, right? We're all designers, product, and engineers, and we follow Agile that helps us to do collaboration and communication so that we have a better change management system. This is through our sprint plannings, our estimations, our prioritization, our testing, our documentation that makes sure that low-risk changes can be repeated in production. So we need that setup process prepared in advance for things like these. And then change control is a subset of change management, but what change control does is it evaluates if the right thing is actually happening. So it tells you there's actually authority vested in people to make decisions for very high-risk profile changes. So we have a CAB meeting, and the CAB meeting allows us to all come together in a room and see what are the most high-profile changes that are going out in the next 24 hours, right? This is the change advisory board, and that helps us organize ourselves so that we know that we're not stepping on each other when high-risk profile changes are happening. Some questions we ask in these meetings are, do we have rollback procedures during, for the high-risk profile changes? Should those changes go out at the high peak time, or should they be rescheduled for when the traffic is low? Because a high-risk profile change, for instance, is when you're switching over a firewall, or you're switching over the whole DNS lookup system, right? Those are high risk, and we have to mitigate that, and this helps us coordinate that. What services or products can be impacted, so you can notify those. Sometimes there are side effects, and you want all your stakeholders to be aware of the changes that are coming. And then, obviously, simple things like, was this even tested in pre-production, and what were the procedures that were used to test it? And when you're preparing, these are very simple things, right? Like when things are not working in your company, everybody's stressing out, everybody wants to know what's happening. But they don't know who to go to, because the right people to go to ask what is happening may be the real task force that's working on bringing things back to stability. And they don't want to distract that. So it is very important to set up in advance a communication strategy for your internal employees. So an email that is easily digestible and easily drafted also, so that when it comes, this can be put together. So you'll see a sample. This is a sample from the manhole fire that I was referring to. And you see how on the left-hand side, the first email that went out is all red. So you know that there's something drastically wrong happening in the company. It's a SEV0. And then we'll see later how we mitigated that to an orange, which is a lower medium priority, and what did we do to get there? And we'll talk about that. And then the whole reason we are here awake in the middle of the night is for our customers. So it is very important to have an external communication strategy figured out, whether it is through our social media and comms, whether it is actually reaching out our high-revenue customers through our sales team on phone calls, or it's actually putting a maintenance page for our customers, letting them know that we're aware of an issue, we're working on it, stay put, and something is going to be resolved very soon. So we need that kind of communication channel for our customers. All right, so that was preparation. Now it's the real deal, right? I'm in the war room. I'm the liaison between multiple parts of my organization, and I need to quickly figure out what to do. The 3 things I need to figure out is assess the situation, see if the right people are online, and understand what has already happened, right? So now we'll see how all the preparation comes in handy because there's a manhole fire and it's very late in the night. So how many people here have been in situations where they felt that there's crisis and they need to act very quickly? And then how many of you actually thought that, I hope I had better resources available or something available to us to handle the situation? And then how many of you actually went back to fix that so you had those ready for the next time? That's awesome. Good crew. So let's get some definitions out of the way. And I don't know if this is like standard between multiple organizations, but we use severities to define the customer impact. So Sev 0 is super critical, everything is down, customers can't reach your site. Sev 1 is loss of critical functionality, but not like the whole site is not down, it's just parts of the site is not functioning. Sev 2 is loss of critical functionality, but there are workarounds around that system. And Sev 3 we can ignore. So using the grid above, we know that manhole fire has cut access from the data center to AWS, and this was a 10 gig connection. And the whole site is unresponsive. It's very slow, it's unresponsive, so we know it's a Sev 0. My peer incident manager is on call. So there's an incident manager who's drafting the email that we just saw to let the company know that the site is down and it's unresponsive, right? So that people can get aware. So we have her online. I'm the technical recovery manager. I got paged. I'm online. A lot of engineering teams were paged as well. They're also online. And our CTO actually also got to hear about it, and he was also online at 2 a.m. because sometimes you need that kind of authority to make very critical decisions when something like, the site is down and you need to do something. So no further actions has happened, and the first 5 minutes, this is all the first 5 minutes of getting on the Hangout, they're over. So going further, we know that the site is unresponsive, and based on what we'd seen before, I go to New Relic, our monitoring dashboard, to see what's going on. Is it just my application that's wrong, or there's other things that are also impacted? And I saw that it was not just my application. It was the internal admin side, all our brands, everything was down. So that gives me an instant hunch that this is not an application issue. It's probably a networking issue. It's more widespread than just me and my team. I also checked the cab to see if any changes went out during the time that could have caused this, but no changes were sent through our side. So that was good. So our instant reaction, when your 10 gig connection is broken, is to fall back. We had a 1 gig backup. So we said, all right, let's fall back to the 1 gig connection. And we did fall back, but the site did not come back in its entirety. It came back in very slow, responsive parts, and we'll see what happened next. We saw, again, application is out of the way. There's a relief to all the application owners, but we saw that the infrastructure on the networking side, there was a surge of traffic to our firewalls. Because what had happened is, as we fell back from the 10 gig connection to the 1 gig, we started having a lot of slowness because there were multiple retries that were set up in the front ends. And because the site was so slow because of the 1 gig bandwidth, the timeouts was causing more retries. So there was a vicious circle. There was a circle of retries and surging the firewalls and the whole ripple effect on our infrastructure. So even as we were trying to recover, it just became hell. It wasn't easy. But at least thanks to the documentation, we knew where the retries were put in. So there's also the third part of it, right? There's infrastructure, there's application code, but there's also infrastructure as code, like we know today, the Helm charts and all. And it's very important to define those boundaries of ownership, because I've more often than not seen infrastructure teams get paged for scaling issues and application clusters, which are actually configurations owned by application teams. So it's also very important to identify boundaries for the ownership of such configurations. But at least in this case, we were clear that this was networking issue. The configs for the fallback were all out of scope for the application teams, and it was the infrastructure team that had to jump in. So this was not my team's issue. Can I go back to sleep? No. I'm still in my warrior mode, right? Because the site is still down. So while the manhole was in the application, there was stuff that was required from the application teams, right? When the retries were happening, we, as application team owners, started changing our code to remove those retries to take some of the traffic away from the firewalls. And then sometimes there are like multiple brands are running. Sometimes you need those application engineers online still to give you feedback that, yes, everything is actually recovered successfully. And sometimes there are very lazy, old legacy systems that will just not auto-connect or auto-recover, and they need a re-kick. They need to be like, all right, let's restart this application because it's not auto-connecting. So we still need the application engineers, even though we've identified that it's an infrastructure issue. And the Hangout sometimes can get very overwhelmed with a lot of people, and with a lot of stress, it can be a little funny. So it's also important to remember the slip-ups, right? Like in this case, one of the biggest thing we realized was, were we too quick to fall back to the 1 gig without thinking the repercussions of actually doing that fallback? I'm running out of time, should go faster. Anyways, so the situation is resolved, right? And I can go back to sleep because, after all the removing the retries, we started, giving some breather to the firewalls. But I know the next day is going to be a good day for retrospective because we'll have to dig in to understand what was the root cause of the issue, the ripple effect of it to the infrastructure, and then learn and document from it. The next day would be a time for postmortem and root cause analysis. And this is the best part of it because the storm is over. This is calm. Everybody's collected. They're thoughtful. And you can actually go through the step-by-step of, like, what did we do and what can we learn from that. So it's the calm part of the whole episode. And the most important part is there's rules of engagement here, right? So there's no punishment for services that did not work as expected, or there's no punishment for decisions that were made during that time, but that did not work in our favor. So it is very important to set that safe culture so that we can understand, all right, what were the vulnerabilities in our process that led to that thing to happen, or what was the information that was available or not available that made us make that bad decision. So it has to be a very, very safe place to actually be able to get to the root of this. So here is the sample postmortem from the manhole fire, and we'll go through some parts of it. But the first one is like you have an overview of what happened, right? We fell back, and then there was slowness. And then we follow the 5 why strategy. So we ask ourselves 5 times, why did this happen? Why did that happen? So we come to a conclusion of a process problem and not a person problem when we go through such thinking. And then, we also document the root cause. So in this case, what we identified as the root cause was that we had ordered a 10 gig backup, but that had not arrived on time. So had we had the 10 gig backup, we would not have had this issue. We would have just done a fallback. Action items, we had to audit all of our retries to see, all right, where else do we have these hidden retries that we're not aware of, and how can we actually get ahead of it for the next time? We need to understand the impact, lessons learned. Well, the lesson here was that, something like a manhole fire is external to our control, but we can definitely build the resiliency into our systems to make sure that when they happen, we're ready for it. And then we realized that in this situation, we did all what we could, and, with the best of resources we had available. So that does conclude my talk. I know, like, the next time we're awakened after midnight to awaken my warrior, I know I'm better prepared for it, so I'm not going to stress about it. I know how to deal with it, and then I also know what my teams and I can take from it for later, so it doesn't happen again. Well, that's it. Thank you.